Hey YouTube, Jim here. Welcome to Top 10 Archive. If one of your deepest fears is being buried alive, this might not be the video for you. But at least there is a happy ending. They all survived. But let's be honest, being buried alive is probably something we all fear, right? If you don't, well then good for you. I'm glad that you're with me to curb my anxiety as we cover the top 10 people who survived being buried alive. And to get into the mood, I want to know, what would you do if you were buried alive?
Number 10. Angelo Hays. Angelo Hays was in a horrific accident on his motorcycle, which sent him head first into a brick wall. He was declared dead when he arrived at the hospital, and his face was so badly disfigured that the parents weren't even allowed to see the body. 3 days later, they decided to bury him. Normally, that would have been the end of a very tragic story, but sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. 2 days after that, he was exhumed for an insurance investigation, and the examiners found that his body was still warm and that he was actually just in a coma. He made a full recovery and would later invent his own security coffin with a chemical toilet and radio transmitter. Number 9. Michelina Lewandoska. Michelina was originally from Poland before moving to the United Kingdom, something she might have regretted after this experience. In 2012, she described in front of a British court how she was buried alive with her hands and feet bound, stuffed into a cardboard box, and 4 inches underground with a 90-pound tree branch on top of her. The man who had buried her was no less than her fiancé's father, Marcin Kaprosak. He didn't commit the crime alone, planning the whole thing with his friends after having grown tired of her. They tased her for long periods of time, tied her up, then took hours to finally decide to bury her alive. She cleverly and ironically used her engagement ring to cut her bonds loose and then clawed her way out. She now lives with post-traumatic stress disorder, but her testimony was enough to sentence the culprits to 20 years in prison for attempted murder. Number 8. A morning walk turned rescue. In 2015, on a brisk November morning, 2 women were walking down a bike trail in Compton, California, when they heard baby cries nearby, and not from a stroller, but from underground. They immediately called the police, who found a baby girl buried under a pile of asphalt. They rushed her to a hospital where they identified her hospital bracelet and the mother, 33-year-old Portia LaRonda Washington. It had been an unwanted pregnancy, and she didn't want anyone to know, so she had buried the helpless infant alive when it was just 1 or 2 days old. Number 7. Unknown 6-year-old girl. A 6-year-old girl in India survived being buried alive after a strange turn of events. The couple who buried her were her neighbors. They approached her with a story that her mother had asked them to take her to a fair in another village. She joined them obediently, and when they reached a sugarcane field, the woman choked her until unconscious, then proceeded to bury her alive. Field workers grew curious after seeing 3 of them walk into the fields, but only the couple walked out, so they decided to go investigate. Local police put out a search warrant for the neighbors and the girl's mother, who was also missing, but it's still unclear if any of them have been found. Luckily, the little girls survived without any serious injuries. Number 6. Harry Houdini. Though done intentionally to himself, it doesn't make things any less scary. Houdini would perform stunts similar to this often, testing the limits of his mortality and of his strength. Of course, it wasn't always successful, but usually very impressive. In this case, Houdini was buried under 6 feet of dirt with no protective case or casket at all. Somehow he managed to overcome the weight of the dirt and pushed one hand above the surface before passing out. His assistants pulled him out, and he was lucky to still be alive. It wasn't the last time he did something of this caliber either. He was also buried alive in an underwater coffin where he survived for 90 minutes. Number 5. Essie Dunbar. Back in 1915, Essie Dunbar of South Carolina had an epileptic attack so bad that doctors declared her dead and prepared her for burial. Her sister, who lived out of town, tried to delay the services for a day in order for her to be present. However, they started before her sister could arrive, though pastors tried to stall, waiting for her. Still, they had to move forward with the burial. It wasn't until the gravediggers had finished burying the coffin that Essie's sister arrived and insisted they exhume the coffin so she could see her one last time. Luckily, she did. Otherwise, her sister would have died from being buried alive. They opened the coffin, and Dunbar sat up and smiled at her sister. It sounds sweet now, but at the time, it was terrifying to everyone. Dunbar ended up chasing the panicked people into town, trying to convince them she was alive. For years, people wondered whether or not she was a zombie. But she was able to live another 47 years after her own funeral. Number 4. Surviving trauma in Nigeria. This boy, named Ibrahim, saw his father murdered by armed men who raided their village in Nigeria. As he was mourning over his father's corpse, the armed men hit him over the head with a machete. He crawled into the shade, and the men grabbed him, assuming he was dead or dying. They buried him under sand, where he stayed for 2 days until his sister found him and pulled him out and carried him home. She only noticed him after a bunch of flies had gathered in the area. Everyone thought she was crazy for touching a corpse, but the boy lived and went on to make a full recovery, albeit with both physical and mental wounds. Number 3. The Tian County Baby. In 2015, a woman in southern China went out to pick herbs and came upon a very unexpected sight. Much like we saw with the baby from Compton, she too heard infant cries coming from the ground. She found the baby buried alive in a cardboard box, buried a few inches below ground, and called the police, who dug him up and took him to the hospital. The boy was born with a cleft lip, and the parents didn't want him anymore. The infant boy spent 8 days underground and was coughing up dirty water after being rescued. It was likely that rain and oxygen found their way through the dirt enough to keep him alive. Number 2. Natalya Pasternak. Natalya lived in Siberia, where she often took her dog out on walks. On one of these walks, she was collecting birch sap with a friend when they encountered a bear. Unfortunately, the bear attacked and mauled Natalya's legs as her friend ran for help. She lost consciousness, and the bear dug a hole to bury her, not out of ceremony, but likely so it could come back later and eat her. Hunters stumbled upon the half-buried body and quickly searched, found, and killed the bear that attacked Natalya. Funny enough, upon waking up, Natalya's first question was, "Did you kill the bear?" She had a long road to recovery, but thankfully survived her nightmarish ordeal. Number 1. Mike Meaney. There are those who go for a 10-day silent retreat away from anyone, and there are those who stay alive for 2 months underground. Much like Houdini, Mike Meaney was set on blowing minds and breaking records. Meaney knew the record of 45 days could be beaten, so he was buried in a coffin with holes for air. He also had access to food, water, and a telephone. Reportedly, while underground, he spoke to boxer Joe Louis, perhaps to ask about his mental strength. 61 days later, with sunglasses on, he came out looking a bit weaker but healthy. Thanks for watching. All this reminds me of fleeing a theater in fear while watching a 1962 film, The Premature Burial, based on the short story by Edgar Allan Poe. It was chilling, to say the least. What about you? Do you fear being buried alive? Perhaps you'd like to have a safety coffin, as they were called in the 19th century, so you could ring a bell to let others know to rescue you. Or perhaps have your cell phone buried with you. Just be sure your family liked you enough to add some minutes to your plan. Before you go, be sure to subscribe, ring our little bell, and give this video a like.